Good morning, everyone, and welcome back to Cooking with Suzanne. So today we're going to celebrate a birthday. My dearest friend Audrey Lukens is turning 65 years old today, and I wanted to make a cake for her, and I thought this was the best way I can do it since we are many miles apart. So a few years ago, my dear friend Audrey made this beautiful book for me. And on the cover is a picture of her mom. And inside is a number of recipes that her mom made while we were growing up. And they're all handwritten recipes, which I absolutely love and cherish very much. And I have to say, it is just such a wonderful way to continue remembering our moms, our grandmothers, our aunts, anyone that cooked for us growing up. To hang on to these recipes, to me, is very, very special. And in the back of the book it says, this was homemade for you with love. And so today I want to prepare a recipe from this book, and a recipe that I remember very well growing up and having with Audrey. And that is a King Arthur cake. And I'm sure maybe many of you have already seen the recipe for King Arthur cake. The recipe is from King Arthur flour, and we're talking over 50 years ago, probably even longer than that. So the recipe is right here, and I'm going to follow the instructions exactly the way Mrs. D'Angelo made it for Audrey. I do believe this was a cake that Audrey requested for her birthday many a times. She also has a recipe in here for a tomato soup cake. And you know, back in the 60s, canned vegetables, canned soups, Campbell's, it was used in a lot of different ways, in desserts and in savory dishes. And it was very important for our moms to be able to have these ingredients. It was a big deal. So I have to try this tomato soup cake too, Audrey. I love raisins, and there's raisins in there, and I bet it's absolutely delicious. Okay, so let's get started on this birthday cake. The recipe calls for, and I'm just going to make sure I have everything correct, 6 tablespoons of unsweetened cocoa. We will need 2 cups of granulated sugar, and all of this is measured out, and 3 cups of unbleached all-purpose flour, and I have King Arthur flour here, so that's the flour I'm using. 2 teaspoons of baking soda, 1 tablespoon of just regular distilled vinegar. So we have 1 tablespoon here, a teaspoon of salt. We're going to add 2 teaspoons of vanilla. And the recipe calls for 12 tablespoons, which is 3/4 of a cup of just a neutral oil. So this is just a canola oil that I'm using here. And the only ingredient which is not in Mrs. D'Angelo's recipe is, I just wanted to share with you that espresso powder is a really nice addition to a cake like this, because it enhances, it's not coffee you taste, it actually enhances and enriches the chocolate so that it makes it even more chocolatey in flavor. So if you wanted, you could add a teaspoon of espresso powder if you'd like to add it to the recipe. But we will make it exactly the way Mrs. D'Angelo did. So, by the way, I'm not even realizing it, but this really is a perfect cake to make with young children who would, want to start learning how to bake, because it's so simple. It's just 1 bowl. And in actuality, if you didn't even have this all measured out, all you would end up having is just a bowl to clean, and that's it. And there's no equipment. And also, if you notice, there are no eggs and obviously no butter. The oil takes the place of that. So there's no butter, there's no eggs. I'm sure that there are many other chocolate cake recipes out there, but this is the one that we grew up loving. So this is the one I want to share with you. Okay, so I just have a bowl and a strainer, and what you want to do is just pass all of your dry ingredients through the strainer. And that's just to make sure that the baking soda, the salt, if you did put your espresso powder in there, your cocoa powder, it's just all dispersed nice and evenly all throughout. So we'll just put in our cocoa powder. I'll now measure a teaspoon of kosher salt. Teaspoon of salt. Although I bet back then our moms didn't use kosher salt, they probably just used table salt. But we'll use kosher salt here. I'm just going to pass this through a little bit and then go ahead and throw in our sugar. Make room for the sugar. And as I said, if you wanted to add a teaspoon of the espresso powder, you would put it in and pass it through here as well. So let's just get this mixed. So it's really just taking the dry ingredients and whisking in the wet ingredients, and that's all there is to the cake. And I actually looked up the King Arthur, the original King Arthur cake recipe, and they served it with a chocolate icing, which is basically a ganache. It's just cream and chocolate, and then you pour the ganache over the top. I do not ever remember having it that way, and I hope that my memory serves me correctly. Audrey, you be sure to let me know. But I seem to remember it was a cream cheese icing that your mom always put on the cake. So if it wasn't cream cheese icing, then I think it was whipped cream, because I don't remember chocolate icing ever being on there. So today we're going to assemble this cake with the cream cheese icing. I do believe I'm correct on that. Okay, so here's all of our dry ingredients. What you can do is just kind of make a little bit of a well. It's a lot of ingredients. And you don't have to do anything in preparation of your pan, because the cake goes into an ungreased pan. And my thinking, and it's underlined, so I think Mrs. D'Angelo was pretty emphatic about that. And my thinking must be because there's a good amount of oil in here that the cake does not stick. Now in her recipe, she uses a 9 by 13 pan, which means the cake would be fairly thick. And I think I have one here. This would be a 9 by 13 pan. I also believe that you could probably do this in 2 8 or 9 inch cake pans and do a layered cake if you wanted to. Not that we have it that way. And today I'm going to actually bake the cake just in a sheet pan like this, so that the cake will be a little more shallow, but I'll be able to cut it into squares and I'll be able to share it with our neighbors. So that's the reason why I'm going to put it in here. Okay. So now you have, you need your liquid ingredients. You're just going to, you know, I don't seem to remember putting in our baking soda. So I think we better get our baking soda in here. We need 2 teaspoons of baking soda. And that's to help it rise, so we definitely don't want to forget that. So let's get 2 teaspoons. I'll whisk it in. And good thing I didn't forget that. Okay, that's why it's really nice to have all of your mise en place ready so that you don't forget anything. Okay, so let me just take my whisk and let me whisk in our baking soda here. So let me just look at the recipe. It's 6 tablespoons of cocoa powder, 3 cups of flour, 2 cups of sugar, 1 teaspoon of salt, 2 teaspoons of baking soda, and then we can add our liquid ingredients. Okay, I think that's nicely whisked. And I have one more ingredient I need to get out of the refrigerator, which is 2 cups of cold water. And because it's a good amount of water into a cake like this, I think it's important to use a good spring water. So this is a good spring bottled water that I'm using here, and it does call for the water to be cold. So we have 2 cups of cold water, 3/4 of a cup of oil, 2 teaspoons of vanilla, and our 1 tablespoon of vinegar. And in her recipe, she has you put your oil, your vinegar, 1 tablespoon of vinegar. Now we'll add our 2 teaspoons. This is a 2 teaspoon measuring spoon. 2 teaspoons of vanilla. Now I'm sure you could mix this all in a bowl first, but I think we will follow it exactly here. So we have our vanilla, our vinegar, and our oil, which is going to go into the center. And then we're going to pour the 2 cups of cold water. And that is all there is to making this cake. And speaking of baking, you want to have your oven preheated at 350 degrees, and definitely put your rack in the center of your oven. So here's 2 cups of cold water right over the top. Okay, and then first thing I'm going to do is just go around with my rubber spatula just to fold in a little bit of the flour into the center, and then I'll grab my whisk and finish it up. And I'm assuming that all you want to do is just whisk this just until all of the ingredients are incorporated. Just taking my time going around the bowl. Okay, just take your time. Don't overwork the cake batter. You really want to just kind of take your time, but make sure it is completely incorporated. I'm just kind of going through it a little bit. Okay, I think it looks pretty good. Make sure you get all the batter. Just put this in the sink here. And let's grab our pan. So this is an 11 by 17, just a sheet cake pan that we're going to use. So let's just pour the batter right into the pan. Use your rubber spatula to really get all of the batter out. So with the 9 by 13 pan, the recipe says that you want to bake it for 35 to 40 minutes. I think with this sheet cake pan that I'm using, I would say it's probably going to be more like 20 to 25 minutes. So in about 20 minutes, I will take a look at it and then decide, just using a skewer, to see if it's ready. It's a fairly loose batter. Okay, so this is going to go into the oven, 350 degrees. I'll check it in 20. I would say this will take 20 to 25. And then we'll let the cake cool, and I'll come back and we'll ice it with a cream cheese icing, and the cake will be ready. Okay, be back in a minute. So in regard to the cream cheese icing, I'm going to not make a large amount. I'm going to use 1 8-ounce package of Philadelphia cream cheese, 1 4-ounce stick of unsalted butter, 3/4 of a cup of confectioner's sugar, and a teaspoon of vanilla. And if it needs to be thinned out a little bit, I'll add a teaspoon of milk. Just to keep in mind, I don't put a lot of confectioner's sugar in my cream cheese icing. I don't like it overly sweet. You could certainly double that confectioner's sugar if you wanted to. You could go from 3/4 of a cup to 1.5 cups. Taste it first though. After you add your 3/4 of a cup, taste it. It's surprisingly delicious, and you don't really need all that sugar. So I will put that together. I actually, it's in another video that I have done for carrot cupcakes. It is the same cream cheese icing that I use for the carrot cupcakes that I will use here for the chocolate cake. Also, I would say that if you wanted to make this more of a composed dessert, you could certainly serve it with a nice chocolate sauce using a really good bittersweet chocolate. Or I know Audrey is a huge fan of milk chocolate, so you can make a nice sauce with milk chocolate. You could serve this, my favorite would be coffee ice cream, because I love coffee and I love the flavor of coffee ice cream. You could serve it with vanilla. You could also toast some almonds, and you could put some toasted almonds with it. So, or you could even do some fresh fruit, some fresh strawberries. Strawberries and chocolate go really well together. You could do fresh raspberries. So you could actually really create quite a beautiful composed dessert here. But we will be back as soon as the cake is done so that you can see. So now it's time to frost our cake. I did cook this for about 22 minutes at 350 degrees, and I just used a cake tester to go through to make sure it was completely cooked, and it's all set and ready to go. So here is the cake, and now we're just going to ice it with a little bit of cream cheese icing. So let's just put our cream cheese icing on, and our cake will be ready. So I have my icing, and now you can just use an offset spatula and just go ahead and get your cake iced. So this amount of icing is going to be a nice thin layer of cream cheese icing. If you really want a much thicker layer, then you would have to double the recipe, which is also very easy to do. But I'm just going to give this a nice thin layer. Okay, I think our cake is pretty well covered, and it's a nice thin layer of icing. And if this was a cake that you wanted to serve for a birthday, a child's birthday celebration, maybe some nice sprinkles over the top could be really nice, and children would love that. So we'll go with 5 birthday candles for Audrey's 65th birthday. There we go. And there we have it. Happy birthday, Audrey. I hope you have a wonderful day. We love you, and we're thinking of you. Thanks very much, and to your mom, Mrs. D'Angelo, thanks for all the wonderful memories. Happy birthday.